A fated mate rejection is supposed to end with the Omega on her knees, broken and begging. But when Deborah Melbourne looked Marcus Sterling dead in the eye in front of 300 witnesses and said, "I accept your challenge," the entire Grand Winter Gala went dead silent. It wasn't Marcus's cruelty that shattered the ancient hierarchy of wolfkind. It was the sound of armored footsteps descending from the throne the moment Deborah's hand began to glow. You think you know werewolf power dynamics? You haven't heard about the Alpha King who hasn't moved from his seat in a decade, the Omega engineered to be an Alpha killer, or the secret Peter Foster has been hiding under his emerald armor. Stay until the end because the twist in Chapter 7 will destroy everything you thought you knew about fated mates and manufactured destinies. The crystal chandeliers inside the Blackwood Estates Grand Ballroom were trembling. It wasn't from the winter storm clawing at the fortress walls outside. It was from 300 wolves holding their collective breath, their predator instincts screaming that something unnatural was about to happen. The air tasted of imported champagne, nervous pheromones, and that metallic ozone-sharp scent that comes right before lightning strikes. Deborah Melbourne stood in the center of the black marble floor, isolated like prey in a spotlight. She wore white wolf furs over a silver dress, modest, elegant, hand-stitched by her own trembling fingers the night before. It was a stark contrast to the jewel-encrusted gowns and designer silks dripping off the high-ranking wolves who circled her like sharks, champagne flutes raised, lips curled in anticipation of her humiliation. Her fated mate, Marcus Sterling, golden-haired, broad-shouldered, the pack's future beta and every she-wolf's fantasy, stood 10 feet away with his hand wrapped possessively around Celine Blackwood's diamond-draped waist. The Alpha's daughter. The real prize. "I reject you, Vivian," Marcus announced, his voice carrying across the vaulted hall with practiced cruelty. "You are a stain on my lineage. A genetic mistake. An Omega pretending to be worthy of a Sterling bond." The crowd leaned in. Wolves loved a public execution, especially the kind that didn't spill blood. Rejection pain was supposed to drop her where she stood. Supposed to shatter her spine, collapse her lungs, leave her writhing on the marble like a dying animal. But Deborah didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't even flinch. Instead, something cold and ancient unfurled in the hollow space where the golden mate bond used to sit. Her wolf, silent and dormant her entire life, suddenly opened eyes that glowed violent violet, electric and furious. Deborah extended her hand across the gap between them. Not in a plea. Not in supplication. In challenge. "I accept your challenge, Marcus," she said, her voice steady as stone. "May the strongest soul remain standing." The moment their skin connected, his hot, hers ice-cold, a shockwave of black static detonated from their joined palms. Marcus Sterling, 200 pounds of pure muscle and arrogance, flew backward like a ragdoll, crashing through a mahogany drinks table and slamming into the far wall with a sickening crack. The hall fell into a silence so complete you could hear the snowflakes hitting the windows. And then, from the raised dais at the far end of the ballroom, came the slow, deliberate sound of armored footsteps. Every wolf in the room turned as one. Peter Foster, the Emerald King, Alpha of Alphas, the wolf who hadn't left his mountain throne in 10 years, was descending the stone steps. His armor gleamed like predator eyes in tall grass, emerald plates etched with silver runes that seemed to breathe with their own light. Dark fur draped across his massive shoulders. His face was all sharp angles and brutal beauty, framed by black hair streaked with silver, and his eyes. His eyes were the color of a forest right before a wildfire consumed it. He stopped directly behind Vivian, so close she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from him. His gauntlet hand, heavy as a tombstone, cold as death, settled on her bare shoulder. She accepted the challenge, Peter Foster said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Deborah's bones, in her teeth, in her suddenly racing heart. Which means, by the old laws, she is no longer your mate, Sterling. He leaned down, his breath cold against her ear, his next words meant only for her but somehow heard by everyone in the frozen room. She is my champion now. The world Deborah Melbourne knew ended in that moment. The nightmare, and her true purpose, was only just beginning. But before we dive in, I need to ask you something that truly matters to me. If you've enjoyed my stories before, or if you're here hoping this one will move you, please don't leave without subscribing. Without your subscription, YouTube buries everything I create. The people searching for stories that make them feel something, stories about resilience, love, impossible choices, they'll never find them. Because the algorithm decided I wasn't worth showing. I'm not asking for money. Just 30 seconds to hit that subscribe button so others can discover these stories too. I pour everything I have into every word, every character, every chapter. And knowing I could reach someone who desperately needs it but won't because you didn't click, that genuinely breaks my heart. Please subscribe. It costs you nothing, but to me, it means someone believes these stories matter. Now let's continue. The golden bond snapped at exactly 11:47 p.m., 3 minutes after Marcus Sterling's hand slid around Celine Blackwood's waist for the 4th time that evening. Deborah felt it go, not like a thread breaking, but like a fishhook being torn from living flesh. Her knees buckled, but she locked them straight through sheer spite. I reject you, Deborah Melbourne. Marcus's voice carried across the ballroom like a death sentence, amplified by 300 pairs of predator ears tuned to the frequency of social destruction. You are a stain on my lineage. A genetic error. An omega with delusions of adequacy. The pain was supposed to kill her. Pack law said rejection of a fated bond would drop a wolf like a severed puppet. But where the gold thread used to anchor her soul, something else rushed in to fill the vacuum. Something cold. Something that had been sleeping in her marrow since birth, waiting for exactly this kind of violence to wake it up. Deborah's wolf opened her eyes for the first time in 23 years, and they glowed violet, electric, furious, wrong. She looked at Marcus Sterling and felt absolutely nothing. Not love. Not even hate. Just a crystalline clarity that tasted like ozone and burned magnesium. I accept your challenge, Marcus, Deborah said, extending her hand across the marble floor between them. Not a plea. A gauntlet thrown. May the strongest soul remain standing. The moment their palms connected, the world detonated. Black static erupted from their joined hands like a shockwave, spiderwebbing across the floor in fractal patterns. Marcus flew backward, his 200 pounds of arrogance slamming through a mahogany bar cart before crashing into the stone wall. Crystal glasses exploded mid-air. Champagne rained down like golden blood. The silence that followed was absolute. Then came the footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. armored. Peter Foster descended from the dais where he'd been watching from his throne like a statue for 3 hours. His emerald armor caught the firelight, each plate etched with silver runes that pulsed with their own cold luminescence. He moved through the frozen crowd like a predator through tall grass, and every wolf in the room felt their hindbrain scream one word: apex. He stopped behind Vivian, close enough that she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from him. His gauntlet hand settled on her bare shoulder, heavy as a tombstone. She accepted, the Alpha King announced, his voice a frequency that vibrated in bone and teeth. By the old laws, she is no longer yours, Sterling. He leaned down, his breath cold against her ear. She is mine now. Peter Foster didn't ask permission. His hand remained on Deborah's shoulder like a brand of ownership while his other hand gestured lazily toward the shattered remnants of Marcus Sterling, who was being helped to his feet by 2 beta wolves, blood streaming from his temple. The challenge has been witnessed and answered, Peter announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The Omega known as Deborah Melbourne is now under the direct protection of the Crown. Any wolf who disputes this may step forward. The silence stretched like a razor wire about to snap. No one moved. No one even breathed too loudly. Alpha Donovan Blackwood, a mountain of a man who'd ruled his territory for 30 years, stood frozen at the head table, his fingers white-knuckled around his champagne flute. His daughter Celine had gone pale as snow, her perfectly manicured hand still clutching Marcus's abandoned jacket. "Your Majesty," Donovan finally managed, his voice carefully neutral. "The girl she's a registered Omega. Surely there's been some mistake. She has no rank, no bloodline worth. Are you questioning my judgment, Blackwood?" The temperature in the ballroom dropped 10 degrees. Frost began crystallizing on the champagne flutes. Peter took 1 step forward, and the entire Blackwood pack took 1 step back. It was instinctive, primal, the way prey animals scatter when the apex predator shows its teeth. "Let me be exceptionally clear," Peter continued, his emerald eyes sweeping the room like a searchlight hunting for defiance. "This Omega just sent your future beta through a wall with a touch. She triggered a power that hasn't been seen in this world for 2 centuries. And you think she's beneath notice?" He turned his attention back to Vivian, who stood rigid under his hand, her violet eyes still glowing faintly in the firelight. "She is coming with me. Tonight. Anyone who attempts to follow us, contact her, or spread rumors about what happened here will answer to me personally." His smile was all predator, no warmth. "And I promise you, I am far less forgiving than she is." Silas's cloak swept around Deborah like a living shadow as he guided her toward the main doors. The crowd parted like water, wolves pressing themselves against walls and columns to avoid even brushing against the king's armor. Deborah's legs moved mechanically, her mind still catching up to the fact that her entire life had just been dismantled and reconstructed in less than 10 minutes. Behind them, Marcus Sterling finally found his voice. "You can't just take her. She's nothing. Peter didn't even turn around. "She's mine," he said simply. "And you are dismissed." The doors slammed shut behind them with a finality that sounded like a coffin closing. The helicopter ride to the Obsidian Palace took 40 minutes through a snowstorm that looked like static on a dead television screen. Peter sat across from Deborah in silence, his emerald armor reflecting the red emergency lights in patterns that hurt to look at directly. He hadn't removed his gauntlets. Hadn't spoken since they left the estate. Deborah kept her hands folded in her lap, watching her breath crystallize in the frigid air. The violet glow in her eyes had faded, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a question she was afraid to ask: what am I? The palace appeared through the storm like a knife stabbed into the mountain, all black glass and steel, angular and brutal, lit from within by lights that burned too blue to be natural. Her quarters were on the 13th floor, accessible only by a private elevator that required Silas's handprint to operate. The doors opened onto a space that could have housed 50 wolves comfortably, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a 1,000-foot drop, furniture that looked carved from obsidian and silver, a bed large enough to drown in. "You'll stay here," Peter said, finally breaking his silence. He moved to the windows, his armored silhouette framed against the storm. "Everything you need will be provided. Food, clothing, entertainment. You won't lack anything. Except freedom," Deborah said quietly. He turned, and for the first time since the ballroom, she saw something flicker behind those predatory eyes. Not quite guilty. Maybe recognition. "Except freedom," he agreed. After he left, Deborah tested the boundaries of her gilded cage. The elevator required biometric clearance she didn't have. The windows were reinforced glass 3 inches thick. She could see the hairline fractures of the security mesh embedded inside. The door to the hallway had no handle on her side, just a smooth panel of black steel. She was 13 floors above ground in a fortress carved into a mountain, surrounded by luxury that felt like mockery. The closet held clothes in her exact size: silk dresses, soft sweaters, pants that fit like they'd been tailored to her measurements. How long had Peter been planning this? How long had he been watching her? Deborah sank onto the edge of the massive bed, still wearing her white furs and silver dress from the gala, and finally let herself feel the weight of what had happened. She'd been rejected by her fated mate, claimed by a king, and kidnapped to a palace in the sky. And the worst part, the part that made her stomach twist with something darker than fear, was that when Silas's cold hand had touched her shoulder, her traitorous wolf had purred. Dr. Sarah arrived at dawn, escorted by 2 guards in black tactical gear who stationed themselves outside Deborah's door like sentries at a tomb. The doctor was a reed-thin woman with silver hair braided down her back and eyes that had seen too many things that couldn't be unseen. "His Majesty has requested a full medical evaluation," she said, unpacking instruments that looked more like torture devices than medical equipment. "I need blood samples, tissue samples, and a baseline scan of your neurological function." Deborah sat on the examination table they'd wheeled into her quarters, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and extended her arm without protest. What was the point of resisting? The moment the needle pierced her vein, Dr. Sarah equipment began screaming. Alarms blared. The vial containing Deborah's blood started glowing, not red, but that same electric violet that had lit up her eyes at the gala. "Shut it down," Dr. Sarah snapped at her assistant, who was frantically pressing buttons on a tablet. "Shut everything down before it fries the sensors." 20 minutes later, Dr. Sarah sat across from Deborah at the obsidian table, her hands folded over a file marked with biohazard symbols and security clearances Deborah didn't have the rank to read. "Your blood is radioactive," the doctor said without preamble. "Not with radiation in the traditional sense," but with condensed magical energy at a concentration that should have killed you in utero. Your DNA has 3 helixes instead of 2. The third one isn't natural, it's synthetic, engineered, spliced into your genetic code before you were born. Deborah's mouth went dry. What are you saying? I'm saying you're not a natural-born wolf, Miss Vance. You're a chimera. A biomagical weapon designed in a laboratory 23 years ago as part of a Black Ops program called Project Chimera. Dr. Sarah leaned forward, her voice dropping to something like sympathy. You were built to be an alpha killer. Your cells produce anti-magic, a substance that neutralizes and destroys lichen power structures on contact. The room tilted. Deborah gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. That's impossible. I had parents. I had a childhood. I was. You had handlers, Dr. Sarah interrupted gently. The people you called parents were scientists assigned to monitor your development in a controlled environment. When the program was shut down, you were placed into witness protection under a false identity and integrated into the Blackwood Pack as an Omega to keep you hidden. Hidden from who? Dr. Sarah glanced toward the door, then back at Vivian. From the man who commissioned your creation, she whispered. Alpha King Peter Foster. Deborah didn't wait for an invitation. The moment Dr. Sarah left, she overrode the elevator's security by jamming her hand against the biometric scanner and letting that violet energy surge through her palm. The system shrieked, sparked, and surrendered. The doors opened. She found Peter in the throne room, a cavernous space of black marble and vaulted ceilings where even her footsteps echoed like gunshots. He stood at the windows overlooking the mountain range, still in his emerald armor, a king carved from stone and violence. You created me, Deborah said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. You commissioned Project Chimera. You made me into a weapon and then watched me grow up like some kind of sick experiment. Peter didn't turn around. Dr. Sarah talks too much. Answer me. Yes. The word was flat, emotionless. I commissioned your creation 23 years ago. I funded the research. I approved the genetic modifications. Every choice that made you what you are, I made it. He turned then, and something in his face had shifted. Not quite vulnerable. More like resignation. You want to know why? He began unfastening the clasps on his left gauntlet, each click echoing like a countdown. You want to understand what kind of monster creates a child to be a weapon. The gauntlet came off. Deborah's breath caught in her throat. His arm, from fingertips to shoulder, wasn't flesh. It was a nightmare of silver-etched metal and glowing circuitry, cables and pistons moving under synthetic skin that looked disturbingly organic. Runes pulsed along the length of it in rhythmic patterns, and she could hear it humming, a low, mechanical whir that sounded like something dying slowly. Wolfbane steel, Peter said quietly, flexing his mechanical fingers. An alloy designed to kill lichenkind. It's the only thing keeping me alive. 25 years ago, I was poisoned by a rival alpha with a toxin that dissolved my arm from the inside out. The corruption spread to my heart, my lungs. I should have died. He took a step toward her, his emerald eyes burning with something desperate and dark. I built you because I was dying. Because I needed a power that could neutralize the magic eating me alive from the inside. You're anti-magic, Vivian, it's the only thing in existence that can stop the spread. He held up his mechanical arm, the runes flaring brighter. I didn't create you as a weapon. I created you as a cure. Deborah stared at the monstrosity he'd been hiding beneath his armor, at the king who was half machine and half dying wolf, and understood with horrifying clarity. You need me, she whispered. I've always needed you, Peter said. From the moment you were conceived in that laboratory, you were mine. Lady Cora Corvus made her move 3 days later in the palace gardens, a crystalline conservatory where winter roses bloomed under artificial suns and the air smelled like honey and conspiracy. Deborah had been granted supervised walks, an illusion of freedom with guards shadowing her every step. Cora materialized from behind a marble column like smoke taking human form. She was beautiful in the way venomous things are beautiful, dark hair coiled like serpents, amber eyes sharp as broken glass, wearing a gown that cost more than Deborah's entire false childhood. The king's new pet, Cora purred, circling Deborah like a predator evaluating prey. Do you have any idea how many wolves would kill to be in your position? How many have tried to earn his attention for decades? Deborah kept her hands at her sides, her heartbeat steady. I didn't ask for this. No, Cora agreed, her smile razor thin. You were built for it. A laboratory experiment playing dress-up as his salvation. It's pathetic, really. He's so desperate to survive that he's chained himself to a manufactured freak. Cora's hand shot out faster than thought, claws extended, aiming for Deborah's throat. Not to kill. To mark. Too scary. To remind the chimera exactly where she ranked in the hierarchy of wolves who actually mattered. Deborah's body reacted before her mind caught up. Her hand came up to block, and the moment Cora's claws met her palm, the world detonated in black lightning. Not the static from the gala, this was pure, concentrated destruction. The energy didn't just push Cora back. It burned her. Seared through her designer gown and carved smoking, branching patterns across her skin like lightning trapped under glass. Cora's scream shattered every window in the conservatory. She collapsed onto the marble floor, convulsing, her flesh smoking where Deborah's power had touched her. The smell of burned meat and ozone filled the air. Guards flooded the space within seconds, weapons drawn, shouting commands that Deborah couldn't process through the ringing in her ears. Peter arrived like a storm front, his mechanical arm gleaming as he knelt beside Cora's twitching form. His emerald eyes swept from the burned wolf to Vivian, who stood frozen with black electricity still crackling between her fingers. Get Dr. Sarah, he ordered one of the guards. Then, to Vivian, his voice dropped to something almost gentle, did she attack you first? Deborah nodded, mute. Good. Peter stood, stepping over Cora's body like it was debris. Then she got exactly what she deserved. Let this be a lesson to anyone else who thinks my chimera is defenseless. He offered Deborah his mechanical hand, the wolf-bane steel humming with resonance against her power. Come. We need to train you before you accidentally kill someone who matters. Deborah found the records by accident, or perhaps by design, she could never be certain which. The palace's security system had been glitching since she burned Cora, her anti-magic bleeding into the electronic infrastructure like poison through veins. Doors opened that shouldn't. Elevators traveled to floors that weren't on the directory. The sub-basement archives weren't guarded. Why would they be? No one unauthorized could reach them. No one except a bioweapon whose very presence destabilized the magic holding the fortress together. The files were organized with military precision in temperature-controlled vaults. She found hers under Project Chimera, Asset V07. 23 years of documentation sealed in black folders marked with Silas's personal sigil. The first folder contained her baby pictures. Medical charts tracking her development from embryo to infant. Genetic modifications logged with clinical detachment, enhanced cellular regeneration, anti-magic synthesis, accelerated neural pathway development. The second folder contained mission parameters, objective, create biological countermeasure to lichen hierarchy. Target application, alpha neutralization and regime stabilization. The third folder made her hands shake so violently she nearly dropped it. Lucian Voss. The scientist who'd raised her. The man who told her bedtime stories about normal wolves and ordinary lives. The father who'd held her through nightmares and promised she was special, not dangerous. His personnel file stared back at her in black and white, deep cover operative. Assignment, Monitor Asset V07 Development in Civilian Integration. Report directly to Alpha King Peter Foster. Compensation, $1.2 million per year plus protection guarantees. There were photographs. Lucian meets Peter in underground parking garages. Lucian submitting monthly reports on her emotional development, her social integration, her complete ignorance of what she truly was. One document, dated 6 months ago, made bile rise in her throat, asset approaching optimal activation age. Recommend triggering fated mate rejection to catalyze dormant abilities. Suggest Sterling, Marcus, high arrogance, low intelligence, predictable response patterns. Her entire life had been a script. Marcus rejecting her wasn't cruel fate, it was orchestrated theater. Lucian hadn't saved her from the program, he'd been Silas's eyes on the ground for 23 years. Every choice, every friend, every moment of her manufactured childhood had been designed to produce this exact result, a weapon perfectly traumatized into activation. The sub-basement door opened behind her. Peter stood in the doorway, backlit by cold fluorescent light, his mechanical arm gleaming. He didn't look surprised to find her there. Of course he didn't. He'd probably watched her descent on security feeds, waiting to see how long it would take her to find the truth. "Now you understand," he said quietly. Deborah's hands ignited with black lightning, folders falling like ash around her feet. "You didn't just create me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You wrote my entire life like I was a character in your story." "Yes," Peter said. "Every word." The Aegis shield fell at 3:47 a.m., torn open like flesh under claws. The sound was catastrophic, a metallic shriek followed by the howl of something that had never been fully wolf or fully human. Alarms screamed through the obsidian palace, red emergency lights painting everything the color of arterial spray. Deborah was still in the archives when the first explosion shook the mountain. Peter moved before the second blast hit, his mechanical arm seizing her wrist and dragging her toward the emergency stairs. "They found you," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The hunters. I knew they would eventually." They reached the main courtyard as the second wave hit. Deborah saw them through the shattered windows, dozens of them, pouring through the breach like a flood of nightmares. They moved wrong, their joints bending at angles that defied anatomy. Their eyes burned red, not with natural luminescence but with LED bright artificial light embedded in their skulls. Lichen hybrids. Wolves spliced with technology and twisted beyond recognition, their humanity surgically removed and replaced with pure, programmed violence. "They're here for me," Deborah breathed. "They're here for both of us," Peter corrected, his emerald armor deploying additional plating that locked into place with mechanical precision. "We're the prototypes that escaped. They want to dissect us, reverse engineer us, and mass-produce what we are." The courtyard became a killing floor. 20 hunters converged on their position, moving with horrifying coordination, a hive mind connected through the technology wired into their spines. They didn't speak. Didn't hesitate. Just attacked with the efficiency of machines wearing meat. Deborah's anti-magic erupted instinctively, black lightning arcing from her hands in wild, uncontrolled bursts. It hit the first hunter and his circuitry exploded, sparks erupting from his eyes and mouth before he collapsed. But there were too many. For every one she dropped, 3 more poured through the breach. Peter fought beside her, his wolf-bane steel arm moving with lethal precision. Each strike was calculated to sever spinal cords, crush skulls, and destroy the technological components keeping the hybrids operational. But even he was slowing, his breathing labored, the corruption in his system draining him faster than he could compensate. A hunter's claws raked across Deborah's shoulder, drawing blood. Another grabbed her from behind, its mechanical grip crushing her ribs. She screamed, her power surging out of control, threatening to bring the entire mountain down on top of them. "Vivian!" Peter roared, fighting through 3 hunters to reach her. "You need to focus on it. Channel it through me." His mechanical hand shot out, seizing her wrist. The moment their skin connected, flesh and wolf-bane steel, something clicked into place. Her chaotic energy stopped destroying everything and started flowing into his prosthetic arm, powering it, amplifying it, turning it into something that glowed with violet-edged destruction. Together, they weren't just fighting. They were annihilating. The link between them wasn't gentle. It was violent, invasive, her anti-magic pouring into his mechanical arm like electricity through water, his wolf-bane steel converting it into something weaponized and precise. Deborah could feel his heartbeat through the connection, erratic and struggling, the corruption eating him from the inside fighting against her power. "Don't fight it," Peter growled, his fingers tightening around her wrist. "Let it flow through me. I can handle it." She stopped resisting. The energy surged from her core through their joined hands, and his prosthetic arm erupted with black lightning traced in silver. The runes etched into the wolf-bane steel blazed so bright they burned afterimages into her vision. The hunters charging them didn't stand a chance. Peter moved like death-given form, his empowered arm cutting through hybrids like they were made of paper. Each strike released a shockwave of Deborah's anti-magic, frying circuits, collapsing the technological scaffolding holding the monsters together. Bodies dropped around them in heaps of sparking, twitching metal and meat. The courtyard cleared in minutes. 40 hunters reduced to smoking scrap. But more were coming. Deborah could hear them howling through the breach, dozens more flooding into the fortress. "We can't hold them all," she gasped, her body shaking from the power drain. "There are too many." We don't have to hold them. Peter turned to face her, his emerald eyes burning with something feral and desperate. We end this. Now. All of them at once. He pulled her closer, his mechanical hand sliding up her arm to her shoulder, then to the back of her neck. The contact points multiplied. The flow of power intensified until it felt like her nervous system was on fire. Channel everything through me, Peter commanded. Every drop of power you've been holding back. I'll direct it. Trust me. You manipulated my entire life, Deborah hissed through gritted teeth. I know. His forehead pressed against hers, his voice dropping to something raw. But right now, I'm the only thing keeping you alive. So trust me anyway. Deborah stopped holding back. The anti-magic erupted from her in a tidal wave, flooding into Silas's body through every point of contact. His prosthetic arm became a conduit for destruction, the wolfbane steel amplifying her power 1,000-fold. He raised his mechanical hand toward the breach, and the energy released in a concentrated beam of black lightning so intense it turned night into day. The blast tore through the remaining hunters like divine judgment. It didn't just kill them, it unmade them, disintegrating their hybrid bodies down to their corrupted cellular structure. The beam punched through the mountain itself, carving a tunnel through solid rock that glowed molten orange. When the light faded, the courtyard was silent except for the sound of settling debris. Deborah collapsed against Silas, her body spent. His mechanical arm was smoking, the runes flickering like dying stars. What are we? She whispered. Peter looked at his prosthetic hand, then at her, something like wonder crossing his face. Monsters, he said quietly. Perfect, terrible monsters. The obsidian palace was a ruin. Half the mountain had been carved away by their combined power, leaving a smoking scar visible for 100 miles. News feeds across the continent exploded with footage of the destruction, two figures silhouetted against black lightning, unmistakably powerful, undeniably dangerous. The wolf packs were terrified. Good. Deborah stood in what remained of the throne room, watching Peter coordinate the response with his advisors. His mechanical arm still hummed with residual energy, the runes occasionally flickering violet instead of their usual silver. He'd told them everything, Project Chimera, the hunters, what she was, what they'd become together. The advisors looked at her the way prey animals look at apex predators. With respect born entirely from fear. The packs are demanding an explanation, one of them said nervously. They want to know what you are. What she is. They're calling her the Alpha Killer. Let them, Peter said coldly. Fear keeps kingdoms stable. Later, when the advisors fled and the ruins were quiet, Peter found Deborah on the observation deck overlooking the destroyed courtyard. Snow fell through the shattered glass ceiling, settling on her shoulders like ash. I won't apologize for what I did, he said without preamble. I needed to survive. You were the solution. I'd make the same choice again. I know. Deborah didn't turn around. That's what makes you honest. Everyone else would lie and call it love or destiny. You call it what it is, necessity. And now? She finally looked at him, her violet eyes steady. Now I choose for myself. Not because you wrote it into my genetic code. Not because some ancient magic decided we're compatible. I choose this. Peter went very still. Choose what? To stay. To rule beside you. Not as your mate, fated or otherwise. Not as your weapon or your cure. She stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch his mechanical arm, letting her anti-magic flow gently into the wolfbane steel. As your equal. As the thing that keeps you alive and the thing you keep dangerous. The ceremony was held in the ruins, broadcast to every pack on the continent. Peter stood in his emerald armor, looking every inch the Predator King. Deborah wore white furs and silver, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. No priests. No blessings. Just Peter placing a crown of black steel and amethyst on her head while 300 wolves watched in horrified silence. The Chimera Queen, he announced, his voice carrying across the broken mountain. Not born. Built. And strong enough to burn this entire world down if you forget what she is. Deborah looked out at the assembled packs, at the wolves who'd once dismissed her as a worthless Omega, and smiled, all teeth, no warmth. May the strongest souls remain standing, she said softly. The new kingdom began not with love, but with the terrifying symmetry of two manufactured monsters who'd chosen each other anyway.